Welcome back to the Oppo Files, our new podcast series here at American Bridge. Each week, we're doing a deep dive into a different battleground state in the lead up to the midterm elections. This week is Nevada. My name is Thomas Hatfield. I am the multimedia specialist here at Bridge, and today I am joined by Thulasi Seshan, who is the deputy research director here at Bridge, and Danny Kazin, who is our VP of campaigns. We got a couple Nevada experts here, so please correct me if I say it incorrectly. I don't want a Selena Meyer moment here, so I'm definitely going to try my best. Obviously, one of the big issues this year in the midterms is the economy. You know, Biden and the Democrats have been doing a lot to bolster the economy, especially in the state of Nevada. Danny, can you talk a little bit about sort of what issues are important?
Look, I think when it's when people that are not familiar with Nevada, I think it's probably worth thinking about it. And I'm stepping back a little bit here, but thinking about it probably as kind of almost three separate states, if that makes sense, right? In the southern Nevada, you have Clark County, really, which makes up the bulk of the Las Vegas media market. And, you know, for folks who know about Vegas, right, that's the most diverse part of the state. It's the most democratic part of the state as well. You know, it's a state that, you know, as you could probably guess, is the economy is very tourism dependent and always has been. And you'll see a lot of that's really where the biggest union part of the state is, right? MGM is the biggest employer in the state. They've got 50,000 folks. They're almost all in southern Nevada and Clark County. When you walk up and down the strip, you'll see mostly, you know, union folks working in those casinos there. And so that you know, economy was hit hard at the beginning during COVID. It has come back and it started to come back. But that's a key, obviously, part of the state. The Democrats will win. It's just always a question of by how much, right? Catherine Cortez Masto won Clark County in 2016 when she won the state and didn't win any other county. That's not ideal, but that can be done. So it's really about the margins at Clark County, and the economy is really, really key there. And which I'm sure we'll talk about soon, choice is key there too. It's a very, very pro-choice state and a libertarian state in many ways, and that issue is going to play better in Clark County than it is anywhere else. So that's kind of part number one. Part number two is up north in what's called Washoe County, right? And that encompasses the city of Reno.
And Sparks, baby!
That's right. At Sparks, Carson City, a lot of pieces up there in that area, which is going to be key as well. And Washoe County is kind of like your core swing county of the state, usually, and I think it will happen in 2022 as well. The state will go how Washoe County goes. And the economy is obviously key there as well, but it's a slightly different economy than you see in southern Nevada. Beyond the tourism from casinos and the lake, you'll also see, you know, Lake Tahoe's up there, so there's a lot of tourism where that comes in. And then historically, there's been a lot of mining in the area as well, right? That was the first part of the state to be built up during the silver rush in the first 1800s or so. And so that's a key part of it as well. And then the third part is really the rurals, and that encompasses a huge part of the state, depending on how you want to classify what counts as a rural, maybe from 10% to 20% of the state or so. And that goes all the way from areas outside of Reno and Sparks up there, as Lucy mentions, down to folks, you know, places just outside of Clark County in southern Nevada as well. That's an area that, again, it's been economy used to be really mining, for example. If you have any cats at home, I have two that might jump into the frame at some point soon. She's looking at us from right above. But if you have cats, your litter box, that's going to be full of materials that come from parts of rural Nevada, right? So it's still like a mining place. It's much more, you know, a key mining place in the country than people realize. That's going to go Republican. It always has, and certainly will this time too. But again, that's about margins, right? So it's about watching those margins. So as you're thinking about the economy, as you're thinking about the issues, it's important to think about the key different parts of the state and how they may play differently.
Tell me a little bit about how our paid program has fit into this.
So as folks remember, after the 2016 election, right, Donald Trump won in part because he did much, much better than people thought amongst really non-college educated, mostly white voters in a number of states across the country, right? And after that, it set off a bunch of, you know, from the New York Times to everyone else, they all wanted to figure out the man in the diner, right? What did the man in the diner think? Why did he start voting for Republicans all of a sudden? They would go from diner to diner and start talking to these men in the diner, right? And so, you know, there was a lot of that question, a lot of that soul searching. What was leading the man in the diner to start voting for Republicans
Women like
and voting
diners
for
too.
Trump? They sure do. And I'll get to that, actually. And we'll talk about our program a little bit. And what it also led to is in 2020, American Bridge ran a program focused specifically on non-college educated voters, especially in small towns and rural areas. And, you know, it was very successful. Biden obviously did much better amongst these sorts of voters overall than Hillary had done, and kind of brought back some of that population that had maybe voted for Obama back in the day. But what we found after 2020, especially when you really look at the program and look at where Biden did well, is not really the man in the diner, as Lucy was mentioning. It's really like his waitress, right? It was like a slightly younger, also non-college, also in that same area, slightly more diverse subset of women who also haven't, necessarily graduated from four-year colleges, who, maybe they voted for Trump because they had a tough time economically during the Obama years. They're looking for a change, but they really like turned against him, right? Not just because of his tweets and his, overall temperament, but also because of his opinions on things like healthcare and things like taxes and things like abortion, right? And so they started to realize that Trump and the Republican Party weren't necessarily standing for them. But we saw that, and we're seeing it right now in a number of polls, that they're susceptible to going back to Republicans during the Biden era, especially for economic issues. And we have to make sure that they are hearing from us and hearing that Democrats really are fighting for them. And so that's been a big part of our program here. And we've really been focused on those exact women in these small towns, in these rural areas. And so when you talk about Nevada, for example, and I think we'll show an ad that we filmed in Nevada as well, we really focused on northern Nevada, both, the Washoe County area that I mentioned, but also the rural areas, right? Like places like Mineral County. That is going to make the difference whether or not Catherine Cortez Masto and Steve Sisolak and the other statewide Democrats win. And so we really, really focused on them and wanted to tell our economic story.
Yeah, let's watch this ad.
My name's Kayla, and I have lived in the Reno-Fernley area for 9 years. I love living in this beautiful rural area. I'm a single mom with 3 beautiful kids. I work so hard to keep my family going. These times have really tested us, but we're rising back up. Joe Biden cares about working families because he grew up in one. Biden is getting Nevada's economy back on track. He put in so many bills that really helped working families. Joe Biden is creating jobs, good paying jobs. He's working to make sure that groceries and gas and childcare are more affordable. Joe Biden is focused on an economy that works for working people. I don't know if I would still be living in the house that I'm living in today if it wasn't for Joe Biden's help. It's outrageous that some companies that make billions of dollars pay zero in taxes. Joe Biden understands that billionaires shouldn't pay lower tax rates than working families. President Biden is making a difference right here in Nevada.
AB Peck is responsible for the content of this ad.
This is a real woman in northern Nevada who doesn't always vote Democrat, hasn't always voted Democrat, but and was speaking in her own words. Like, we didn't script that for her. We asked her what mattered to her and what issues were important to her and why Democrats were fighting for her, and wanted to give her the chance to tell her own story.
I really love that shot of the mountains in the background where she's talking about like how beautiful Fernley is. Like, I'm also a Westerner. Like, I'm from Salt Lake City, and something that like we are super proud of, like where we come from, of our homes, of the landscape, of being caretakers for the land. I think something that really bothers me and a lot of like Nevadans about Adam Laxalt is that he is just in fact not a Nevadan. Like, this is a man from DC whose father was a politician, whose grandfather was a politician, who rakes in billions of dollars from his DC. Like he does not in any way, shape, or form really understand like why Nevadans are passionate about Nevada. Like, can you imagine this man ever going on a hike? Has this man ever been to Lake Tahoe? Is very unclear. Probably not, right? Like, he's the definition of a carpetbagger, and that's just really at odds with how Westerners feel about our homes.
I was reading just the other day about how even his family in Nevada is apparently not a huge fan of him.
Yeah, it's sad that it somehow got worse from his last run. So he ran for, I want to say, governor 2 years ago, and 12 members of his family came out with an ad saying, "Don't vote for this guy. We hate him." And then this year, 14 members. Like, somehow he managed to piss off an additional 2 people at Thanksgiving. Like, I don't know, didn't give him a share of pumpkin pie, whatever. But like, that's not just like one uncle, that's a lot of your cousins and aunties who got a problem with you.
He's done so many sort of things that really aren't good for the state, I think, in sort of helping with sort of working people. He's talked about opposing raising the minimum wage. He supported the Trump's tax cuts. On the other side, Catherine Cortez Masto, very much someone who is a champion of working people, not someone whose own family hates her.
Well, yeah, I think to your point, right, Adam Laxalt is not someone who stands for Nevada's working class because he's never really had that experience. Like you've mentioned, right? Like, he's voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was designed to help working families. he opposes raising the minimum wage because this man has never had to make ends meet on a minimum wage in his life, right? Like, this is not someone who sits around the kitchen table, adding up his budgets and his taxes. He doesn't have to worry about that, so he doesn't really understand it. Whereas Catherine Cortez Masto, she's the first Latina senator to represent the state of Nevada. She's someone who really is grounded in the community and is putting these pro-working class families and pro-working class policies first on her agenda.
Yeah, if you think about someone, literally any senator anywhere, who's like somebody who's going to put her head down, work, with anyone to get things done, like more important to her to have results than, getting the attention, like that is like her to a T. And as Lucy said, it's like there is no more perfect, I think, contrast of two candidates on that front than those two, right? Like the more you get to know her, the more you respect her, the more you like her, the more you get to know Adam Laxalt, you're his family, and you come out in two elections in a row saying that he's terrible. So it's, the contrast there is pretty clear.
I think another one of these contrasts that a lot of Nevadans are going to be talking about, and something, Danny, you mentioned at the top of the show, is, Adam Laxalt's stance on abortion. He's really, really anti-choice, and, on the other side, Catherine Cortez Masto is very pro-choice. We have this clip, actually, of Laxalt calling Roe v. Wade a joke.
Certainly what's going on in D.C., oftentimes is a bipartisan affair, doesn't represent real people and real values out in the state. I've been very vocal. I know you guys don't live and breathe politics, but certainly Melissa knows since the first day she's known me, one, on life issues, but on Roe in general. I'm a constitutional conservative lawyer, and Roe v. Wade was always a joke. It was a total, complete invention.
Cool. Love that. Love our fundamental rights being a joke. Big fan.
This sort of line wouldn't help a Republican candidate in any state in the country, but like it is hard to stress how important an issue this is in the state of Nevada, right? Like think about the state of Nevada as even when it votes Republican, it is not a Republican state. It is a more libertarian, even conservative state. They are like Republicans, Democrats, politicians should get out of my day-to-day life and out of my rights, basically, right? I mean, it is the only state in the country that has a on-the-ballot option to vote for none of these candidates. People that like actually want to show up to the voting booth and say, I hate politicians so much, I want to actively vote for none of them, right?
And a lot of people do.
And people do. They do every cycle, right? It's usually the third highest vote getter, and it was in 2016, 2018, and 2020, I believe. So, this is a state where people like, even the Republicans in the state, they want government, out of their lives in the terms of their rights, right? When it comes to marijuana rights, when it comes to sex work, when it comes to gambling, when it comes to a lot of things, right? And freedom to choose is a piece of that. And so this is like, it is as pro-choice a state as any state in the country, and this is going to be as hurtful, and already is as hurtful a line for him as any that we'll see anywhere.
Well, I think one of the things that's particularly notable about Adam Laxalt making this comment, right? Like, there's been a lot of arguments from the Nevada GOP that, abortion is enshrined in Nevada law, like abortion can't be under threat in Nevada. But actually, as we know, right, there's a supremacy clause in our Constitution, and so federal abortion action does supersede state protections. So for Adam Laxalt, someone who's running to represent Nevada on a federal level, to be this anti-choice is really dangerous for the fundamental rights of Nevadans. He could support a 15-week ban like Lindsey Graham's abortion ban, which would then abrogate the rights of Nevadans to choose how their own bodies are free within the state. It would override the will of Nevada voters who had enshrined the right to an abortion in a constitution in state law in 1990. So the level of threat that he poses to what Nevadans have long since considered a fundamentally settled right cannot be overstated.
It seems like he's really sort of out of touch. And, one of the things I was sort of reading about but don't really know a ton about, and Felicity, I wonder if you can sort of tell me about this. Wasn't his comms director like at January 6th, or am I crazy?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was. Laxalt is pretty buddy with insurrectionists, He is a big promoter. He was the head of Donald Trump's Nevada campaign in 2020 and really pursued a lot of those efforts to overturn the election. He has also already promised that he will be pursuing those efforts in his own election, which, if you'll remember, hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's like this thing that a lot of Republicans are saying now. Part of my job is I watch a lot of the video that we get in, and a new thing is Carrie Lake, who we're going to be talking about next week, just said like this weekend she's not going to accept the results of her election. It's this really bizarre thing where it's like, it's ever since Trump, all these guys are just really it's the new play, I guess, is no elections are legitimate unless you win. I think we have audio. We have some audio of Laxalt saying that the 2020 election was rigged.
Well, there's no question that they rigged the election.
There you have it. They rigged the election, according to Adam Laxalt, and they're going to rig the next one.
I think what's great to remember about Laxalt, too, is not only is he a wacko, and he is a wacko, but he's also like just a craven politician, right? I mean, he was trying to be more moderate in his race in 2018, and he saw he was going to have to run for statewide election again after he lost in 2018. So he went all in on Trump's reelection. He went all in on the big lie, and he did it in order to win a primary. Right, that's the one reason he did this, and he went all far right, and he's staying there because he feels like that's his chance on his base. So it's an important thing to remember about him is that's all he wants. That's all he wants is to be in office here, and he'll do anything it takes to get there. And right now, he believes anything it takes means anything it takes to throw out election results.
As an American, I find that really offensive. Like, the sanctity of our democracy is one of the things that like binds people together. It's why we come to this country. As someone whose grandparents were denied the right to vote, I find that sacred on a deep and personal level, and this sort of like complete disrespect for what that means to each and every one of us, to like what the power that holds in our lives and our self-determination and our self-respect, to treat it like a toy or a game or just a tool for another craven politician. It's deeply offensive. It's deeply wrong.
Speaking of people who are willing to do anything to sort of overturn election results and undermine democracy, Felicity, can you tell me a little bit about this guy running for Secretary of State, Jim Marchant?
Oh my gosh, Jim Marchant is, I would say honestly, like the most extreme election denying candidate on the ballot anywhere this year. In fact, don't even quote me. Karl Rove wrote an op-ed saying that Jim Marchant was more extreme than Donald Trump when it comes to election denialism. This guy doesn't just think the 2020 election was rigged. He says that no Nevada election since 2006 is counted. He is organizing a coalition of all crazy Secretary of State candidates across the country so that they can all be in place in 2024 in order to certify Trump's victory, whether or not he wins in these key states. So the level of like conspiracy and commitment to undermining democratic stability like cannot be overstated. He is a QAnon dude. He is a anti-Semite. He is a proud descendant of Confederate General Lee. Like, this man is batshit crazy and absolutely anti-democratic, and unfortunately leading in the polls.
If you care about the future of democracy in the United States, you have to care about this race. I mean, this race is incredibly important. And it is like the Secretary of State's race have never mattered as much as they matter now. And it's not only like in Nevada because of Jim Marchant, but it's also nationally in part, as Leslie mentioned, because of Jim Marchant. A lot of times people think that just, if you win the Senate race, if you win the gubernatorial race, or if you lose them, everything down ballot's going to be the exact same. But it's not the case. I mean, in 2018 in Nevada, we won every single race statewide except for the Secretary of State's race. We have to pay attention to this one because, as Leslie mentioned, this guy is scary. He's a nutcase. He's really dangerous, not just for the state of Nevada, but for us certifying elections in the future and having a democracy. Like, keeping this guy out of office is really key.
I actually want to play that video Felicity mentioned of him saying that no one has been elected since 2006 legitimately. And I want to maybe add in the point that I believe Jim Marchant himself was elected since 2006. Is that incorrect?
In 2017. Yep, he was elected.
Let's play this video and just try to break down what's happening here.
The shape that our country is in right now is because of election fraud. And it's vitally important that we elect secretaries of state that will make sure that we have a fair and transparent election. And the people of Nevada have not elected anybody since 2006. They've been installed by the deep state cabal.
There's so many levels to this one. I mean, let's put aside the anti-Semitic history of the word cabal, which we could go on a whole separate conversation about. Jim Marchant himself was elected to the legislature in the period between 2006 and now. That's a problem. But let's also talk about, the one thing he got right there, right? Like, it is important to elect secretaries of state who will guarantee free, fair and transparent elections. It's just not him. And like, not to fearmonger, but to really walk through what Danny was outlining. Let's suppose Jim Marchant wins in 2022. Let's suppose, as Nevada is a purple state, there's a close victory for the Democratic candidate in 2024. Jim Marchant has told us he will not certify that election. that's a constitutional crisis. We don't have a procedure for what happens in that case.
He ran once in 2020, and he said that the only reason he lost also was because he thought the election was rigged. There's video of him and Trump at a rally, like, talking about how that the only reason they've lost is because they're just rigging all the elections.
So we have something in common. President Trump and I lost an election in 2020 because of a rigged election.
I mean, what are these guys going to accept that people just don't like them? Sometimes you lose because nobody likes you. It's, cry into your cake, watch a sad movie, get over it. Destroying democracy is not the way to process. Therapy.
Not that it should matter if you lose by like 1 vote or lose by like 10 votes, but he was much closer to the 10% of the electorate that he lost by. That wasn't a close race that he said was rigged. He lost bad, and he's still going out there and said that thing was rigged.
Okay, wait, Celeste, you were also telling me about he's friends with this QAnon influencer. I don't really understand the full story here.
Okay, so this, buckle up for this one. It involves ghosts. So 107 is this guy's pen name. He's a QAnon influencer who some people believe is the resurrected incarnation of JF Kennedy Jr., who did not die in a plane crash but actually was reborn as 107. Putting that whole conspiracy theory aside, this guy shows up at Jim Marchant's door right out November 4th, 2020, and says, "Hey, I had an idea for you."
I'm JFK Jr.?
I'm a ghost. No, it's not Hamlet. But he does show up and he goes like, "Hey, are you going to run again?" And Jim Marchant's like, "Oh, maybe." He's like, "What if you run for these Secretary of State positions?" And so 107, this QAnon ghost cowboy dude, is the motivating force behind Marchant's decision not only to run for Secretary of State, but then to recruit these Secretary of State candidates across the country in order to not just increase the possibility of triggering a constitutional crisis in Nevada, but to really do that nationwide.
Yeah, the Secretary of States are really important positions, and Jim Marchant is the person sort of leading this coalition of what they call the America First Secretary of State coalition. And it's just all these people who, and we talked about it a little last week with Christina Caramo, these people who just, they don't think their job is to, run fair and free elections. It's rather to make sure that only Republicans win from here on out. It sounds like we have a lot of scary candidates in Nevada, and it's going to be a scary close race. So it's time to bring in our polling director, Ian, to tell us a little bit about what he's seeing on the ground. Ian, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Yeah, scary tight races for sure. Probably the statewide between both Gov and Senate candidates. We have some of the closest races we're seeing in the battleground overall. So using two recent polls, you have USA Today, which has CCM up 2 points over her opponent, and the Gov race very tight as well, both within the margin of error. In the USA Today poll, the CNN poll, both candidates are down to their Republican opponents, 44 to 46, both under that win number, both well within the margin of error. So we're looking at super tight races that are going to be late breaking, with upwards of 8 to 10% of folks being undecided right now. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these candidates are able to frame the race, especially with the growing concern around the economy and inflation, especially in Nevada.
Yeah. Do we have numbers on some of the issues that are really important? I know we've talked a lot about abortion in this episode. We've talked a lot about housing. We've talked a lot about the economy. Do we know what issues are really galvanizing voters?
The economy is it. Not it, but the economy is the leading issue, right? Especially for Nevada, coming out of 2 years of a pandemic that really hit the tourism industry, where most voters who are voting in this election are adjacent to, working in a tourist-fueled economy in many ways. Coming off the back of that and going into an inflationary period that doesn't seem like it's letting up for these voters is really pushing concerns and is going to be driving folks and their decisions at the ballot box. Again, as we stated in all these other podcasts, right, we have the Inflation Reduction Act, but the question is going to be, are voters feeling that on their pockets, right? Like, they're going to vote with whoever's lightening their load. And in some of this polling, we're seeing evidence that maybe they think Democrats are helping them out, but a lot of evidence saying that if we don't convince these late-breaking voters that we are actually better for the economy, it's going to be a little rough. One of those numbers coming out of the CNN poll is that 46% of Nevadans believe that the economy is the number one issue. 57% believe the situation is getting worse. So that is kind of showing you where they think this Democratic administration is putting them, and we have to remind them of the things that Joe and other Democrats in Congress are doing.
Abortion's also been a really big issue. One of the things we talked about was Adam Laxalt said that Nevada is not a pro-life state. Is that what you're seeing in your numbers?
Yeah, no. 39% of voters are actually angry about the overturning of Roe in Nevada, according to latest polling. That is not as much as we've seen in some other states, but we know that that's a galvanizing issue, especially for those kind of leaning Democratic independents. So I would say that it's an issue everywhere. And I do think that Republicans do believe that's an issue for them. Both candidates have been trying to moderate and cool the ire of the voters of Nevada for their previous stances on abortion, while trying to hold that party line. So if there isn't any evidence that he is fundamentally lying, his actions and the actions of the Republican Party in all these battleground states kind of tell me otherwise. They're definitely worried about it.
They definitely don't like to hear Adam Laxalt on leaked audio saying that he thinks Roe v. Wade was a joke. It definitely does not seem like people in Nevada are enjoying having their fundamental rights taken away.
Not at all. And CCM is the candidate that's pushing for the Nevada state law to hold firm, and she's letting the voters know that the candidates running for governor and senator, and also AG and all the others, they're not exactly fans of that Nevada state law that kind of codifies the right to an abortion in the state, and that it's at risk. So the more the Nevada voters in her camp believe that, the better this election will be. So again, it's just an election of narratives, late breaking.
This is going to be a really tight race, and it's one that was really tight in 2020 and with the presidential race, and it's one that Trump was really laser focused on sort of trying to overturn results. And I think as we talk more about how we just talked about with Jim Marchant, it's really important that we elect sort of pro-democracy Democrats who are going to protect voting rights and make sure that everyone has access to the polls.
100%. Assuming it's as close as we think it is, those types of efforts could come up again. So yeah, we definitely need to make sure we're securing this.
Look, you heard it from me, and you just cannot take these races lightly in the state of Nevada, right? I think there's some good news here potentially, which is that if you look at recent elections, Democrats, sometimes end up doing well really late in the election, right? A lot of the state of Nevada, especially Southern Nevada, is kind of like a late deciding electorate, right? Back in 2018, for example, Steve Sisolak was losing on the polling average on election day. I managed Jackie Rosen's race. I think our polling average on election day was 46.7 to 46.7, like truly tied on election day. We won by 5 and Steve won by 4. So, it's not to say that that will definitely happen again. We certainly don't know that that's going to happen again. It's possible late deciders will go the other way. But I think what we know is it's super, super close here, and it could change on a dime up until the last day.
Out of those all, the tightest race by far is Joe Lombardo's. At the top of the ballot, he is the Republican nominee to be the governor. He is the sitting sheriff of Clark County because he's in fact not resigned from his job. So let's talk about really dropping the ball on your day job there. But he's been the sheriff of Clark County for 2 terms. He's most well known for overseeing the response to the October 1st massacre in Las Vegas, and that was a real tragedy that still really resonates through Nevada today. But he's capitalized on his political celebrity from that and launched that into this gubernatorial campaign that he's just really not ready for. He is not educated or prepared to lead on issues ranging from education to healthcare to women's reproductive rights. I mean, he is simply not ready to be governor on day one. And if you add that to his really backwards and dangerous views on a lot of these issues, he's simply not an acceptable choice for Nevada's next governor.
As Ian and Danny were both saying, is I think reproductive rights are going to be huge this year in Nevada. So maybe, Felicity, can you tell us a little bit about more specifically what sort of Joe Lombardo says he's going to do about abortion rights in Nevada?
Honestly, it's what Joe Lombardo hasn't said he's going to do. He said everything. He has chosen every option possible and said them all at one point or another. His moral core is not that firm when it comes to this issue. So, Joe Lombardo was anti-choice. He was anti-Plan B. Then all of a sudden he was pro-choice, and he was going to defend Nevada's abortion laws, but only, of course, when it came to a general election debate, not during the primary, right? We have clips of him saying that he's open to banning contraception. Then you get his comms director saying, no, actually not. What we know fundamentally about Joe Lombardo is that he doesn't understand the issue, that he has a track record of supporting dangerous anti-choice candidates and issues. You know, he's donated free police helicopter rides to anti-choice groups. He's donated to these fake clinics that people call crisis pregnancy centers, right? Like, his record shows that he is dangerous for reproductive rights, no matter what is coming out of his mouth on any given day, which could be absolutely any option under the sun. When Roe was overturned, Steve Sisolak signed this executive order guaranteeing the safety of abortion patients and providers in Nevada, right? So if you're coming to Nevada from, let's say, Texas to get an abortion, you will not be prosecuted, and the doctor performing your abortion will not be prosecuted. Joe Lombardo has said he would repeal that executive order. So that's an immediate, raising the stakes, raising the threat level for providers of reproductive care in Nevada in a way that cannot be understated for its significance.
We actually have video of him saying that. Maybe we should pull that up.
Would you repeal Governor Sisolak's recent executive order expanding abortion access and kind of helping with ensuring out-of-state patients are taken care of?
I don't know if it's codified in law and there needs to be a repeal on that, but if it's a position, the way it's written in the law, yeah, absolutely.
You would repeal that?
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
I love the deep sigh at the beginning of that. He's like, oh, I don't even want to be asked about this.
I love that he tries 3 different answers.
You can tell that this is not going to be an issue that's going to help him win the governorship.
On the other side, this is something that Sisolak's been pretty clear on. He wants to, protect reproductive rights in Nevada. Danny, can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's pretty simple. This is a pro-choice state, no question about it, and abortion rights are protected in the state because of Steve Sisolak, because of the race that he won in 2018, because of the fact that we're still holding the Senate and the House there in the state. Right, that's key. This is not by accident. This is by design. We need Democratic elected officials in the state, and as you saw right there, having Lombardo take over can directly mean losing these rights for women across the state of Nevada, rights that are incredibly popular. So there's no question that he doesn't want to talk about it. I mean, there's a deep side there for a reason.
One of these others clear contrasts, I think, is what you were talking about a little bit at the top of the show, Danny, about is sort of their position on housing. Felicity, could you tell us a little bit about sort of Joe Lombardo and sort of I guess there's this donor of his, right, who's a big slumlord?
Yeah, so this guy Robert Bigelow, what a character, believes in The Walking Dead, big UFO fan, and also has made his money by being the CEO of Budget Suites of America, which is essentially a short-term rental chain that profiteers off evictions. So Robert Bigelow is Joe Lombardo's #1 donor. And so then you wonder, why is it that Joe Lombardo doesn't seem particularly pressed to address Nevada's housing crisis? All you got to do is follow the money. And meanwhile, Steve Sisolak has really pushed his Home Means Nevada program. He is really fighting for affordable housing in the state of Nevada. Joe Lombardo's solution so far has been I don't know, maybe we'll sell federal lands. Great, okay, let's endanger public lands is your only idea to solve a really pressing working class rights issue. Come on, man.
Housing is just the perfect example of how Steve has the opportunity to turn the conventional kind of political wisdom of Nevada on its head, right? We talked at the beginning of this episode about how Republicans basically depend on the rurals in Nevada, and they depend on winning northern Nevada and Washoe County to win statewide. But Lombardo is not a northern Nevada guy. He's not a rural guy. He really knows Clark County, and that's really all he knows. And Steve has worked incredibly hard for the last 4 years, and he has got a great new ad out. I think it's called Southwest Steve, just showing how often he's jumping on Southwest and not using taxpayer dollars to fly in a private plane that some governors have in the past, but instead just jumping on Southwest and going back and forth between northern and southern Nevada, and just knows the issues from the back of his hand in the entire state. And housing, as we talked about, is a key one, right? It's key in southern Nevada, it's key in northern Nevada, and Steve knows it incredibly well. He's been great on it as governor, and this is an example of where you see Lombardo just doesn't know these issues in the state as well as you think he would, and as well as he needs to win the state as a Republican.
Well, we just have a little bit of time left. Should we jump into the AG's race?
Oh my gosh, Sigal Chattah. Yeah. One of the quotes that she's most famous for in Nevada is saying that she would, quote, like to see her opponent hanging from a fucking crane. You could bleep me out, but that's her actual words. And to add some context to this, her opponent is the only Black statewide elected official in Nevada. So she advocated for lynching a black attorney general. It's really only gotten more colorful from there. She's pretty equal opportunity with who she hates. You know, she hates a lot of different groups of people. But one of her favorite groups to beat up on is trans folks. And I don't really want to repeat the slurs that she likes to use because they're offensive and dark. But she tweets them out a lot. A lot. Somebody should get her to log off Twitter. It's not great.
It's amazing when I look through some of our research documents here at Bridge, how many are just like crazy things that people have tweeted. And it's like, I can't, like, you can just log off. You don't have to be tweeting all these like insane takes. You can just log off.
Find a hobby, learn to knit, go for a jog. So many options.
One of the other things, you know, that we keep talking about with a lot of these people is she's, you know, super anti-choice. You know, I was reading that she's called for, you know, a Texas-style abortion ban, you know, in these really extreme things for the people of Nevada.
This is somebody who is out of the mainstream of even right-wing Republicans in the state. But again, it's not, you know, voters are not going to know about this unless this information gets out there, unless they really know how nuts this person is, and instead of just voting down tickets. So, yeah, there's no question that, again, this is another candidate in the state of Nevada that the more you know or the less you like her.
The more you know him, the less you like him is I think, very similar to Adam Laxalt's whole family not endorsing him.
I think it's a good title to this episode.
I do want to talk about one of my favorite donors of hers. This guy, his name is Curtis DeBoard. He was investigated by the FBI for illegal weapons smuggling. He was part of an international weapons smuggling ring in the 90s, and he, quote, he threatened to kill the children of informants on his smuggling ring. Oh, and he also illegally provided guns to cults in the 1980s, was also investigated by the feds for that. He turned it around and decided to become a legal weapons dealer. He now deals weapons internationally to Afghanistan and other enemies of the U.S. government. And he's Sigal Chattah's like one of her top donors. So, you know, her like cutesy little slogan is like, let's make crime illegal again. But she also loves taking huge donations from terrifyingly violent criminals.
Sounds like there's a lot of scary people running in Nevada this cycle.
Happy Halloween, man.
Happy Halloween. The scariest thing is all these Republicans running in Nevada this year. That brings us to the end of our Nevada episode of the Oppo Files. Tune in next week as we break down all the Republican candidates running in Arizona. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to American Bridge on YouTube and all your other favorite podcasting platforms so you don't miss out on that and future episodes of the podcast. Also, make sure you're following American Bridge on all your favorite social media sites, especially TikTok. All our accounts will be in the description down below. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.
At American Bridge, we're holding Republicans accountable. Subscribe and join the fight.